so swag, the confidence to act and believe as if you know something no one else does. Today is a picture of swag of two characters. Number one is the prophet Elijah. Number two is the centurion. And both of these two demonstrate a type of swag that contrasts one to another. We have to kind of look at our own swag and decide what is it, how is it we carry ourselves. I can't imagine being married for 50 years, but you two deserve to walk around with a certain swag that many people can look to and admire because you're together. And I'm pretty sure you didn't do that on your own. I'm pretty sure God helped in the love of family. Elijah sets up this showdown. He has what I like to call a little bit of an arrogant, kind of a cocky swag. He is all about power, and my God is the best God. In the Old Testament, it was not uncommon to have multiple gods, dueling gods, and whoever's God did the biggest, bestest thing, they were the God. That was the powerful God. That's an Old Testament theological understanding. And so we have the prophet Elijah, and we have all these other prophets of Baal, and these people of Israel are being misled. They're being led astray. They're following another God and all these other beliefs. And Elijah comes out with this statement, which I believe still cuts to our heart today. He says, "How long will you go on limping with two different opinions?" I think that cuts us today. I've heard the statement between a rock and a hard spot. But I think when I hear Elijah say, "How long will you go on limping with two different opinions?" it speaks to the battle of our heart and our minds when we consider the life we live and the faith we believe in or we demonstrate. Because there are plenty of times when it just doesn't seem like these two things are lining up. Our faith, what we believe in God's grace and His mercy and His goodness, and the reality of the world. And we find ourselves limping between these two things. Or perhaps in the case of the centurion, we find ourselves with someone who is ill or dying or needs to be healed. And we are caught between knowing we probably can't do that, but what do? I think this statement speaks to our culture today. How long will you go on limping between two things? We are in the middle of a political storm. And I think there are people in our country who still actually believe if you vote for a certain people, we'll be a better Christian country. That's not true. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. If you actually believe in your mind that this political system that does the best it can and operates a form of governance, I know, but if you think that is your answer to faith in bringing God into the world, you absolutely are misinformed. Way off. You know what religion is to politicians? It's another vote. That's what it is. Let's be honest. That's not easy to say. It's a struggle to say this. How long will we in this country go limping between the idea that our political leaders will bring us a religious revival? Misinformed, but a lot of people limp right there. How long in our country do we limp between the resentments that we hold in our life toward people that have hurt us, spoken ill of us, harmed us in any way, shape, or form, and forgiveness, that which God in faith teaches us? That's why I know God helped them in their marriage. Forgiveness. Look at these two, forgiveness. One more than other, but forgiveness. How long do we hold on to what we think we deserve in terms of prosperity, in goodness, in recognition, in what God promises, which is simply that I will abide with you, be with you, and love you? We are constantly battling between everyday life and everyday faith. Life is about prosperity and recognition and getting what's mine and doing the right thing and earning all the right accomplishments. And we think we actually control that. And to some extent, we do control our freedom of choice. But God's grace and mercy is a gift that we are able to experience forgiveness and peace and contentment, even in marriage, even in broken relationships, even in things like illness and struggles. That is God's grace. How long will we go on limping between alternatives? That was Elijah's question, and it's a question we have to face today. Elijah's got swag, though, because Elijah sets up this showdown. And he says, you get all your prophets to build an altar in wood and put a bull on there, and I'll build my own altar with wood and put a bull on there, and you cry out to your God and see if you can light it all on fire, and I'll cry out to my God and see if I can light it all on fire. So he has the prophets of Baal do this, 400 and some, and they're going on about their business, 9 o'clock, 10, noon. They're stabbing themselves, they're bleeding all over everything, and nothing happens. Elijah's swag, he starts provoking him. Elijah's like, maybe your God's sleeping. Maybe he's busy doing something else. Maybe he's just a little occupied. And so then after it's all done, okay, you guys feel, Elijah says, why don't you get some water and throw it on my wood and my offering? And then he has him do it 2 more times. Everything is drenched. That's swag. That's confidence. That is complete and utter confidence in what God is going to do. I think it's a little arrogant, too. That was like me praying about the baptismal font. That's not the way God has called me in ministry. Now, the centurion has just a little bit more humility in his faithful swag. The centurion, is not a believer. He's not a member of the church. He's not an Israelite. He's not a member of the synagogue. And in fact, he never once speaks to Jesus directly. He's just a guy who's got a good heart and loves the people, treats them fairly. And in fact, the people who went to talk to Jesus about him, they said about the centurion, he built us a synagogue, he treats us well. But that guy never saw Jesus. What he knew was about Jesus. He knew about Jesus, and so he asked people to go to Jesus for him. A little bit humbler swag. Isn't it fascinating that Jesus uses someone we might actually refer to as an atheist or an agnostic to make an example for the rest of Israel? As the story finishes, Jesus says to all the believers and all the churchgoers, I haven't found such great faith in any of Israel. And isn't it something that Jesus brings healing to this man of humility who sent to Jesus, who was loving and who was a great person to the people, and healed his servant? He was not a believer. He was not a member of the church. I wonder how we could see God working in people who didn't necessarily fit our theological understanding of the power of God in Jesus Christ. but sometimes we discount them. Jesus didn't. So Elijah calls for fire back to my buddy Elijah, and poof, it all goes up, burns to dust. But in the end, it wasn't about Elijah's swagger or swag. It wasn't. It was about turning hearts back to God. Because before Elijah prayed for this to happen, he said, I'm a servant of yours, I'm a humble servant of yours. And then Elijah said, and in order to turn the hearts of these people back to you, will you do this? And it was done. And as we heard, the centurion's servant was healed because people spoke well of him. And Jesus' heart had compassion because of his faith. That even though he wasn't a follower, he knew of the power of Jesus. And people advocated for him. I guess what I'm going to ask you today is, what is your swag regarding your faith? When you see a big group of people that need intervention, like Elijah? Or what is your swag when someone who doesn't necessarily believe asks you to go to Jesus for them? What is your swag? I still think if I pray hard enough, that baptismal font can make its way up front. It may not be quickly, but it will arrive. You see, because when our prayers are answered, things happen. When our prayers are prayed in faith, things happen. And sometimes we think it's all about us, but it's not. It's about the people around us that help us. We all have swag. You know what swag means? Saved with amazing grace. That's Lutheran swag. It's not about who you are or what you do. It's about what God does for you. It's about the others that you enlist to help you in your life, in your journey of faith. Sometimes it's tough, but I want you to believe in God's love and the power of that love. Bob and Diane, you don't know this, but you now have a job today. You too will be giving communion to this side of the church. I know you're beat up, Bob. And I know you have trouble standing. But we will put a chair right here and you will give the bread. You will sit in that chair and give the bread. Because that's what you can do today, and that's comfortable. And you will give the sacrament to us. And Diane, you will be here with wine, and you will commune your family in honor of the 50 years of God's amazing grace, the swag that has been demonstrated in your marriage. And in that regard, you will show us how God is continuing to use you and all the rest of us. We may not be able to stand on our own 2 feet either, Bob, but we can serve God. Because that's what swag is all about. It's about figuring out how God's amazing grace is still a part of our life. Amen. I invite you to rise as we sing.